What's going on, guys, and welcome back. So, who went to Seattle? How was your challenge experience? Well, today we're going to go over the top 64. I have a few deck lists that I'm actually going to look at, breakdown, including first and second place, and you know it's going to be one of them. The location deck that really took everyone by surprise. You gotta love these challenges. It seems like every single challenge we get one of these decks, whether it's the Perdita deck down in Atlanta, or whether it's Green Steel just blowing up Las Vegas, or the location deck taking on Seattle and making a really good run at it. That wasn't the only Amber Steel surprise though that we have. So we do have a Mufasa deck to go over as well. When we look at the top breakdown, Ruby Sapphire coming in as the number one with 16. When I did my prediction, I actually said 16 for Ruby Sapphire as the first place deck, so that's pretty cool. We got that one right. I said 13 for Emerald Steel. We were off by one. Ruby Amethyst overdid, can't even think of the right words, overperformed what I was expecting. I said 9 Ruby Amethysts we're going to top. We had 13, so they actually did better than expected. Amber Steel with 11, keeping in mind this is the Mufasa and location deck as well. So there was 9 Steel Song. I was one off, had said 10. I called the 5 Sapphire Steels though. I felt like Sapphire Steel was going to be a good call for this event. Unfortunately, they did not make that run into the top 8. Like I said, I thought the deck could. I mentioned a few times in that video too that it seems like Emerald Amethyst Tempo just doesn't get played as often in the United States as it does over in the European events. However, I did predict, I think it was like 6 of these to make it, so we were off a little bit there. Like I said, I should have went with my gut and picked less of them. Ruby Amethyst, those players took those spots away from the Tempo. We had Lemon Lime, Amber Amethyst, and I said a repeat, but I was wrong. It was Purple Steel Hyper Aggro that ended up making it instead. So overall, my top 64 prediction was pretty close. Overall, I think it's actually a pretty healthy format. We had 3 decks basically with 20% or higher. That's actually really good as far as a competitive standpoint is. And then we had the Amber Steel with 17%. Again, a couple of those being other versions of the color combination. But then if you figure in those 2 versions, then Blue Steel, Tempo, Lemon Lime, Amber Amethyst, and Purple Steel, that's 7 more decks in that basically rogue category. So we have the 4 top decks and then 7 other decks, rounding out 11 different decks in the top 64. That's actually a pretty good meta if you ask me. You got the defined top and then quite a few realistically decent choices otherwise. So if we go ahead, I'm actually just going to get me out of here for these just to make it all a little bit more appealing and easier for you guys to see. We have the Purple Steel Hyper Aggro deck. A lot of the time these Hyper Aggro decks are super cheap. We see it coming in about $72. He made top 64, so congratulations there. In your 1-drop spot, you have the Broom, the Chernabog, Maleficent, and Pascal's a couple of them, which is just kind of nice because it's evasive. If your opponent can't deal with it, it can just quest and actually get you a decent bit of lore. We do see a Crab also in there, so that helps you take out something like a Diablo. You get the Pascal down, come down with a Crab. Your Pascal can then take out a Diablo, even if it's at the Cove. And it kind of feels bad making your opponent use like the Storm Rage on or Strength of the Raging Fire on your Pascal, knowing that you have all these high questing characters like Smee, Maleficent, Lawrence that they're going to have to deal with in the meantime. Mickey Mouse too, a 1/2 but resist 1 on turn 1. Kind of like Pascal, he can just be that pesky little card that doesn't seem to want to go away. Otherwise, there is the Fire the Cannons and Befuddles. These aren't really 1-drops, they're 1-cost cards, and what I mean by that is they're more disruption cards, and by more disruption cards, they are completely disruption cards. They're not cards you play on turn 1. Essentially, you play like your Broom, your Followers, your Maleficent, whatever on turn 1. Then turn 2, if you don't have a 2-drop to come back with, you can play a second 1-drop character, and then also like a Befuddle or Fire the Cannons. Get rid of your opponent's character, and then just try to get out on them very quickly, very early. Or you pair these cards up obviously later in turns with your low-cost characters, because the deck is filled with a lot of low-cost characters. In that 2-drop spot, we are playing the Dock, which really nice because something that the aggro strategies often run into is running out of resources. So a card that you can play later in the game, especially if you have no hand to discard anyway, it just essentially draws you 2 cards, so it feels really good. Mr. Smee, obviously, we're playing a steel deck, not even necessarily aggro, but we're playing steel, so Smee is going to be in there pretty much all the time. The Madam Mim Snake, also the bounce package, especially with the goat, is going to just be a really strong way to close out games. We do see the Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom, and also the bosses on a roll. I had a video about my best aggro strategies for the format, and I talked about this combination here a lot, and I said I'm surprised more Amethyst players weren't doing it. Like if you're playing a hyper aggro strategy and you're using Amethyst, why would you not play the card that lets you look at the top 5, put them in an order, and gain a passive lore in the process? Not only is it like GOAT, where it guarantees you a lore that turn for sure, done deal, signed in, delivered. If you see your Gathering Wisdom and Knowledge, or you see your GOAT, you can put these cards to the top of your deck, ensuring that you're going to get to them, and then next thing you know, you get them, and you play them, and you get the lore, and a lot of the time you win. We see that Friends on the Other Side is not being played in the list, but say you have Dock in hand and you know you're going to be able to draw a couple, you have a character on board like a Crab, a Pete, a Fox, something like that, where you don't really care about questing for one, or even if it is the Lawrence and you just want to get to those other cards faster. You play your bosses on a roll, well, you sing it with your 3-cost character. You sing the bosses on a roll, and then you can go ahead, look at the top 5, put that Gathering Knowledge and the GOAT at the top, gain your lore, and then you play your Dock. And guess what? You get to draw the GOAT and the Gathering Knowledge. And then you play the Gathering Knowledge, get 2 more lore. That's 3 guaranteed lore right there in that one turn with a GOAT in hand, meaning, hey, I have GOAT next turn. So I really, really like seeing the bosses on a roll in tandem with that Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom. Like I said, then we go into our 3-drops. Lawrence is just an absolute beast. Not only is 4 willpower really strong when he has the 4 strength, that's also a problem for your opponent. And then just questing for 3 is very strong. Like I said, the Crab there for some utility, especially with that Pascal. Madam Mim Fox, one of your bounce package. Your characters rush, deal with your opponents. Being able to bounce that Pete to be able to reuse him a couple times, bounce your own Mr. Smee to be able to not lose him when he would die in the end of the turn because of that 3rd damage. Smash, this card is really, really strong right now. I absolutely love seeing that in the list. Not huge on the Fire the Cannons, but I understand. Befuddle, really good card. I like it a lot. And a sneaky card that I've been messing around with is I'm Stuck. It's inkable, and unlike Befuddle where it's 2 cost or less where you bounce it, it's really nice because like you get to those later turns and it can hit higher cost characters and just stop them from readying at the start of their turn, which essentially does the same thing. It slows their tempo down that one turn. They don't have to pay the ink to replay it, so I'm not saying it's better than Befuddle. I'm just saying that I've been messing around with I'm Stuck and actually kind of happy with it. So let's go ahead and look at another list. This time we're going to look at the Mufasa deck. So they are playing the 6 songs, being the 4 Let the Storm Rage On and the 2 Strength of the Raging Fire. 6 non-character cards in a Mufasa deck, perfectly fine. And because they are 3-cost songs, we see the Cinderella in here really being able to take advantage of that. Daisy Duck is just a godsend for Mufasa strategies. It's a great turn 1. It's not a bad top deck late. It's not a bad hit off your Mufasa. Daisy is so good for these types of decks. So now you have like Daisy, Smee, Piglet, really strong turns 1 and 2 options that again aren't bad in that late game. Doc and Lawrence, really good 3 options. Both multi-questers that serve other roles as well. Doc being able to get your characters cheaper. Lawrence being a very good challenge threat. Then you have your Pete. Like, we're playing Steel, Pete's going to just be in there all the time, especially in the format we're in. Rapunzel going to be mandatory. Really liking the 4-drop Tinkerbell. Just, you don't have a ton of card draw. I mean, you have your Let the Storm Rage On, you have your Rapunzel, you have your Tragic Hero opting not to play the Julieta. So we have Tinkerbell, though, where when you play her, then you look at the top 4, you can add a character to your hand. More often than not, you will, in fact, hit a character. Otherwise, we have the Chen Po, just an absolute beast of a bodyguard. The man, the myth, the legend, the betrayed leader. Mufasa, obviously going to be a 4 of. Tinkerbell also there as a 4 of. So on turn 4, you can play the other Tinkerbell, get the effect. And then turn 5, if you really wanted to, you can shift Tinkerbell on top of her and just save a little ink potentially. The option is there. Not saying you need to do it, just that the option is there. In addition to being able to singing your songs, you also have the shift line for Cinderella, which is just really strong. Cinderella Stouthearted is a very, very good card right now. And lastly, the one-off Chernabog, just once again, a really strong card, great boss character. Not really anything to say about it. So overall, I like the list a lot. I will say I like the 6-drop Mufasa, or not Mufasa, Simba, who is able to draw you the couple cards, discard 2, or just deal the 2 damage when he takes out, or was it when he challenges and takes them out, or is it when he quests? But it's on play, and then it's also a recursive effect. I do like that. I like him and Tinkerbell just because on play they both do something. So that way when your Mufasa leaves the field, if he hits one of them, as soon as they hit the board, they actually get to do something, guaranteeing you some type of value and an immediate return with them. So overall, though, I really like the list, and it was pretty neat to see a Mufasa deck making the top 64 while not being surprising. Most people probably would have said Ruby Fasa, but I think Steel Fasa is a very strong contender. So on to second place. That was a pretty good finals match too. I actually was watching it, debated going live and doing that, but I was like, nah, I'm just going to sit on the couch with the kids and enjoy this. So we see that the Queen Shift line is in there. I'm a huge fan of the Queen Shift line. I like it a lot, especially because of a card that we actually don't see in here, which is World's Greatest Criminal Mind. I think that card is really good right now in this format period, and then you add in the Queen Shift line, it makes the card even better. I like it as a 2 to 3 of. But we have the Queen Shift line. 3 Daisy Ducks, so we can really get aggressive here. No Piglets we're seeing. Just the Daisy Duck Smee for that real quick aggro start. This comes up so big against Popsicle decks because it's really what you have to do. This deck has to get out early, and if you can hit like Daisy Smee, Lawrence 1, 2, 3, you're actually going to be sitting in a pretty good spot in that matchup. So by all means, it's not like it's an auto lose, it's just unfavorable. Cinderella, like the Cinderella playline is going to be really, really strong. We know that. No Stout-Hearted Shift line though, which on one hand it's actually kind of nice, keeps the cost curve of the deck at 5 max. The deck, I don't want to say it's a fast one because without the Piglet it's not like full on committed, but I mean 3 Daisy, 4 Smees. What else? You do have the Baloo in there too for the bodyguard passive lore. So I mean, we've seen Steel Song kind of morphing into this where it's turning into a potentially really fast strategy, and it makes it very difficult for certain decks to deal with it, especially like even Ruby Amethyst. If you're on the play with Steel Song, you're almost favored a bit more, and some people are going to say you're favored by a lot more because of the fast start that you can potentially hit and go for. But we do have the 4 Cinderellas on one still, obviously. 2 Bare Necessities. This card seems to jump all around. I've seen it not played at all. I've seen it as 4 of still. I like it as like a 1 or 2 of. And then we have the 3 Ursula Singers. Ariel's obviously going to be 4. And we've seen a lot of the Steel Song list going back to playing Gaston. Getting that 5 Singer down is just so strong for this deck and very, very important for what you're trying to do. With only playing the Whole New World, though, do you really need the 5 Singer, or should you maybe have played 4 Ursulas since she can sing everything else in the deck? I don't know. I see the argument for both, especially because he is a 3/3, which just being a challenge threat with 3 strength is something to not sleep on. We kind of talked about Lawrence already. We can see why he's there. He can one-shot a Daisy. He's difficult to deal with, takes a couple cards usually, and quests for 2. The song lineup, we saw the 2 Bare Necessities already. Then the 4 Storms, 4 Strength, 3 Zeus. Really, really like Zeus right now. And obviously the 4 whole new worlds. We talked about the Queen shift line. And other than that, the rest is pretty standard, being the 4 Pete, 4 Rapunzel. And I do like 2 Naveen here. I've seen some lists playing for 3. I've even seen 4, which I strongly disagree with. I think that 2 Naveen is the correct ratio, but I will accept it if you prefer to play 3. Overall, really strong deck. Like I said, the biggest thing here is the no Cinderella Stout-Hearted. I think it's just streamlined, quick, and just the cost curve, especially like with a discard format. That's a big reason we see that. Is just it's hard to get to those higher cost characters when decks are getting so fast, consistent, and discards running around. Like, it's not just green steel, but even lemon lime discard. Like, it's difficult to play decks that need like 7-8 ink when you have those types of cards. Ruby Amethyst may be the exception just because of the sheer amount of draw that it has. So this was the second place list. Once again, just going over that. If you want to see any of the lists, all the lists, all that good stuff, ink decks, if you just Googled Lorcana tournament results, also click ink decks, go on any of the events you want, and you too can see every single list here. So I'm not going to link them down below. The first place list then, green steel, and of course it's just going to be the same as Zan Saeed and everyone else's, right? Not quite. It's actually a little bit different, so that's kind of refreshing. I mentioned this multiple times in videos. I mentioned this quite a bit often. Is Luke, he's part of the Team Labyrinth TCG, I want to say. I know he's on one of the big teams in the Lorcana scene, and I want to say it was the Team Labyrinth. He was like, was he in the one who was like a 45th seed or 54th or something like that, and ended up playing on the draw a couple times, and then made his way all the way down to the finals and took first place. So congratulations, Luke, on the great showing. We do see the standard ratios, however, on our 1-drops being the 4 Diablos, 2 Coves. I've mentioned the problem I think that the game was heading towards with green steel was that in my deck core spreadsheet, that is available through Medify membership, as well as all kinds of other great perks. Link down below. I'm not here to talk about that. So, but in that spreadsheet, when I think I had like 19 first place or second place finishes in set championships and just other tournaments going on recently. I got to add a bunch from this event now. Out of the 19 lists that qualified for it, though, 56 out of 60 cards were basically unanimous across them, meaning the deck was so streamlined, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It means the deck's very well refined, but at the end of the day, it's kind of a bad thing when it's a discard deck that is just that refined, that clearly it's that good, it doesn't need to get changed around. However, I talk about it when I talk about deck building, and I have a course on deck building where I mention that you can't just straight up copy a list and take it to the next event all the time. It doesn't always work that way because people see the list and then they want to beat the list, so they tech against the list, and you have to be ready for that and think about it. So like when you see this list right now, break it down, look it over, and say, how do I beat this list? Even if you want to play this deck, right? If you want to play this deck, this is really important. Look over the list and say, if I was playing against this deck, what would I do to beat it? If I'm playing Ruby Amethyst, what would I change to beat this deck? If I'm playing Popsicle, Steel Song, Tempo, what could I change to be better against this deck? And then once you realize if there's changes that those decks might make to beat this deck, now take this deck and say, okay, if they made those changes, how do I get back ahead of them? What changes do I make to ensure that I stay ahead of those decks? You can't just net deck and copy it and take it to the next event and think it's going to do well. Sometimes it will. But again, sometimes people will be prepared for it. And if you're going to a locals, this is huge. Locals, you build for your event. That's one of the biggest tips I have when people ask me for help. Build for your event, meaning this is a DLC. So for a DLC, for the most part, you don't like tech for certain matchups hard. You put just general techs in here. Like the Baboom and Doc are obviously in there because of the mirror match, but in general, they're both still good cards, and it's not like they're going to be bad into other matchups. Are they less than ideal? Sure. But at the end of the day, they're still useful into other matchups. They're not just straight up dead. A great card example of this would be the Magicka Dispel, the 4-cost, where against discard, it's great. Anything else, it's really not good at all. So would I play her in a DLC? No, I would not. Would I play it in a local? My local? Absolutely, because discard is so predominant that I don't mind putting a specific tech in there when I know 25% of the room out of a 25-player field is going to be playing that deck. So building for your event is a huge thing that I want to just reiterate to people when they're deck building. So otherwise, I really like the dock, by the way, for the mirror match. Like, you're discarding each other's hands, you're getting it out, and it's just a body you throw down on board. You get a couple more cards. And again, in other matchups too, especially if your hand's starving for resources, it's just a free 2 cards. So I do really like dock in there. I'm not huge on Boom. I know why it's there. I understand it. I'm not huge on it. I like Smash more. It's an okay card though. I'm not going to take that away. It's an okay card, and it performed really, really well for him at this event. Then we got the 4 morphs. That card is just really, really strong right now. There's so many good shift targets and steel. And then we got the sudden chills, Ursula's. Them are both pretty much standard. Instead of 2 Ana, he did go down to the 1. So what cards aren't in that core? How I said that 56 of the cards are the same. We're missing 1 Ana, 1 Hypnotize, 1 Pete, and 1 We Don't Talk About Bruno. So, lo and behold, that is 4 cards. And which cards are added in instead? We got 2 Baboom, 1 Doc, and that 3rd copy of Muses instead of the 2nd one. So, once again, this goes back to that, is it good for the game? And I don't think it is, that 56 of these cards are unanimous across all of these decks. Once again, this list shows there's a 4-card difference. Well, that's where we're at. But at least set 6 looks like it may really shake that up. After this week, so starting next week, I'm really going to start ramping out set 6 content, stuff like that. I just want to get through the rest of this month. But the Diablos are in there. Hypnotize. I don't really think I need to explain the deck too much, but if you don't understand why the deck works real well together or what it does, even if you're falling behind, just all of a sudden once you start discarding their hand, you starve their resources, you start controlling their board, especially through Muses. Like, playing songs to bounce their characters is so strong. Just keep that in mind. Like, Muses is there as a great disruption tool, especially if you have discard outlets but not really removal outlets, and you can like sing a song, do a little damage, and they have a character with 2 strength or less, bounce that character back to their hand, and then use your discard outlet to effectively remove it that way. Beast Tragic Hero, this card is just absolutely insane. The Brunos, and then the Tinkerbell as well. Overall, really, really strong list. Really, really good player. Congratulations. And that means we have one more deck to go over. And that one is Steel Amber Locations. So I'm going to go over the characters first because there's not that many. I mean, what, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, so 20, 4, 4, 28 characters. We got the Captain Hooks, which obviously help out with the Smees. It helps out. Is there really locations that matter for captains or anything like that? Doesn't look like it. We got Nottingham, Neverland, both vanillas. Pride Lands doesn't matter for Hook. Bayou does not as well. Yeah, none of our locations actually matter for him being a captain or a pirate. So he's just in there for the Smee. And being a challenger, the 3 attack on your turns, it's just really strong. This format, being able to deal with things like getting rid of daisies fast, especially in this deck because you're playing so many non-characters. Your opponent's daisies have actually a pretty good chance of making you whiff on characters. But if you have a hook and you come back with like a Fire the Cannon too, like it's just a really strong way to remove a character because that's 5 damage on turn 2. Daisy Duck though, so you got your Duck and your Smee. You're using these characters to, I mean, pardon me if I get the strategy of the deck wrong, but I think it looks pretty self-explanatory. Daisy, Smee, and then John Silver just being able to get very aggressive early. You have multi-questers on turn 1 and 2. Then you can play your John on 3, and then you come back with 4. We see so many 1 and 2 cost characters, or sorry, not characters, locations. You come back on turn 4, drop multiple locations, and all of a sudden your John Silver has resist 2 and quest for 3, and he becomes so difficult to deal with. And then you just start piling up these locations. So now they have to try and get rid of the John Silver. They got to try and get rid of the locations. And again, after turn 4, you just start dropping multiple locations, and it becomes very fast, very difficult for your opponent to deal with it. Doc is in there as another draw engine outlet. And then the Fix-It Felix, also a draw engine outlet. If you have a location in play, you get to draw a card when you play the little one. And then the Shift 3 one, your locations get 2 more strength, just ensuring that they stick around and last a little bit longer. I've talked in my local group, Dave especially is a huge location fan, especially with set 6. I think locations are going to get even better. I think we all think that. We might see more location focused decks, and Rise of the Titans might be a pretty decent card this set, which means, hey, steel meta once again, yippee. Anyway, I think that we're in a really good spot. Ooh, didn't even realize that. I think that the format is in a good spot. I think that heading into set 6, things are looking up really well. I'm excited for the game. I think that it's progressing really nicely. I like the way everything's been going for it. It'll be interesting to see what our next set championship card is. Hopefully you guys got your Mirabelles, all that good stuff. But anyway, like, share, subscribe, comment down below. Keep coming back. And thank you guys for watching. Until next time, take care.